Alrighty, guys. Welcome to the Ogre and the Ass podcast. All right, today we have Arthur and we have Eric with us. Arthur, go ahead and introduce yourselves a little bit. So we kind of prepped this a little bit for you. In our last podcast, we talked that we're going to have a therapist on board with us and a little bit what we're going to talk about. But go ahead and introduce yourself. How long have you lived here in Utah for?
From Utah, we moved here from Los Angeles in 2003.
Los Angeles. So what made you move here?
Los Angeles is expensive and school's cheaper over here. So we decided to come out this way. But my family lived out here at the time. So they gave us like the offer, hey, come live with us, go to school, and then you guys can have real jobs.
Okay. So I like that.
Wait, what school did you go to?
Which time?
Oh, wow.
So my first school I did was massage school, and I did that,
You did that?
job for 14 years. And then in the mix of all that, I went back to the 4-year college. I went to UVU and majored in, what did I major in? It was psychology. It was behavioral science with emphasis on psychology. And then graduate school after that for counseling.
Awesome, dude. That's great.
Yeah.
Holy cow. And when did you start being a full-time therapist?
I think it was right after I graduated. It was like 2015-ish, end of 14, beginning of 15.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yep.
Well, just on behalf of us, like, welcome to the swamp, man. We're really happy to have you. We're excited for today, what we're going to be talking about. So today's whole episode is really going to be based on the mental health of children. And obviously, I've been working with you for a while. I see how well you work with the kids. So before we get into this too much, I kind of want to hear your backstory. So why, like, what brought you to start working with children? How did your career lead this way?
Well, that could be a long story or no. I went to school. The first thing I started going to school for was medical school. I was going that direction. And the closer and closer I got to the end of like all of the higher classes in biology, chemistry and stuff, I was like, I'm not feeling this. And then I shadowed a doctor and I was like, I don't really want to do that. And plus I'll be gone from my kids. It was kind of like a good time of their life for both of my kids. And I was like, I just don't see myself doing that. So my wife started college and I took one psychology class with her. And we were both like really fascinated with that and how people think, how they behave. And I was like, dude, this was cool. Let's do another one. Let's do another one of these. And I switched to double majoring. So then I just kind of looked at my GPAs. UVU has a way of like separating your majors. And I had 2 different ones on there. And one was all right. And then the psychology side was like a 4.0. I was like, I should probably do that for a job. So, then I really heavily focused on it and just took off and went that direction. But when I was just kind of in between classes, like one of my specialties it was like a self-made specialty, I guess you could say. I am really good at nonverbal communication. And basically what that means is I'm good at reading you, like reading body language. I got certified under Paul Ekman in micro expressions of the face. So little twitches of your face. If you ever saw that show, Lie to Me, that was based on that guy's work. So I kind of do that stuff.
And you studied right under him?
Yeah. Well, it's like an online training that you take from, like, he designed it and stuff like that.
Oh,
but
wow.
It's pretty intense, like what you see. Like, you have to really practice watching people. And like in between classes, I would sit in like the chairs in the wall and just, it's kind of creepy, but I'd sit and watch people. But you learn a lot just by seeing, like, I can't hear what they're saying, but I watch like what they're doing and imagine what they would be saying, or imagine, gestures that their hands do or whatever. And it was really interesting. It was fascinating because I would get better and better at talking to people on top of that. So it's like if someone was talking and then they shifted their weight away or however it's like, oh, something happened in the conversation, because everyone thinks about, like, I used to teach at UVU as well, and I would ask the classroom, like, what was your first language? Like, what was your guys' first language?
English.
So mine was actually sign language.
Okay. It's actually wrong in both of you. It's body language, because when you were growing up as a child, you couldn't speak at all. So I mean, like, imagine teach a little kid that doesn't talk yet the word clap. Like you have to show them, and they're like, oh. And when they do it, you praise them and go, oh my goodness, that was so great. And then they're like, oh wow, I'm gonna do that again, you know. And they learn from seeing. They're just, if you watch a baby just absorbing everything around them, they're not making a lot of facial expressions yet and stuff. They're just watching everything, and it's pretty fascinating. But later down the road, I had worked at the prison. Not my first choice,
but you had to pay bills.
It was probably one of the most evil things that I could have done, because it's not like working there as a prison guard or an officer, as they would like to be called. I was there as a therapist. So imagine I have these hardened criminals that do awful stuff, and I get to hear about it and then help them with it. And if you imagine some of the awful things that they've done to people, like, you kind of, in your mind, you're like, I don't want to help this guy. Like,
yeah, you kind of want to let them sit there and rot.
Yeah, you feel depressed? That's good. We'll see you later. You know, like, but I didn't want to, like,
leave 6 feet of rope in a sandwich.
Yeah. So I learned a ton, especially with body language. I've rarely met someone who's better than me at reading people, but they're all at the prison. Like, they are so good at reading you. Yeah, because that's all they have all day to do is watch people. And they can watch mannerisms, gestures, their mood, their lunch, their pee break, or whatever. They're watching everything you do all the time. And they're always looking you up and down when you're talking to them. They'll watch where your hands go and how they'll ask you a question to see if you change your posture on them or you turn away. And it's like, I'm noticing all of this as they're talking to someone, especially if we had like a new intern come in and work with us, and I'm watching this guy talk to and the intern's like doing all this. I'm like, oh, he's totally messing up. This guy's already owned you in the conversation. And it's kind of scary because some of them they're not chained up, you know, like I'm like this to them and they've killed people or something. And you're like, I got to watch my back. It was really stressful. So I guess that's probably the thing. It was really stressful to see.
And they master that tactic without ever having like some formal education.
Yeah.
Just they have nothing else to do, and they don't.
Else.
Wow.
It's bad. And the reason it's stressful is because, like, for one, as a therapist, I'm like, oh, tell me how you feel, right? Like, all those questions you're not really supposed to ask. But I'm like, hey, so what's going on? Do you want to talk about something? And at the same time, I'm constantly watching for my own safety, just in case they decide to snap on you. Because the building I was in, it wasn't like I was working with death row inmates. Those guys, you don't want to talk to. There's no helping them. They're pretty bad people. But the building I was in was the mental health building. So, like, one of the common questions that I would ask is, like, you know, how's your day? How you feeling? Are you taking your meds? Are you hearing voices? And I never thought I'd ask that on a regular basis. You know, it's like going to McDonald's and you order nuggets. They're like, what kind of sauce? Like, that kind of a thing you ask at your job. And I was like, you hearing voices? But most of the time they'd say yes. I was like, what? Like, it's just insane. Like, when I first started, I was like, what are they saying? You know, like, I was just like soaking it in and like hearing these crazy things that they would say. And after a while, you heard the same stories. You just get like, you still hearing voices? And they're like, yeah, anything different? No. Okay, cool. We'll see you later. And like, you just walk it off after that. But the reason I stopped there was so stressful, found a better place, and I started working with teenagers. And it was an outpatient. We had the contracts for the drug court kids in Utah County. And I would have these kids that basically they got busted using drugs somewhere in town, and then now they're court ordered to come see me for an evaluation and therapy. So I was like, okay. The reason I said therapy is because they don't usually grab onto it because they're still going out in the world and using.
Yeah.
We do, you know, urinalysis on them or UAs to see if they are using randomly. And it was interesting because I'd sit there and listen to the story of these kids. And I could picture in my head a flashback of a prisoner saying the exact same story. And I'm like, what? You know, and it would blow me away. I'm like, hey, you know what you sound like right now? They're like, what? I was like, this guy I knew at the prison had the same story as you. And he was like, oh, that's cool. And I'm like, no, like, did you hear what I just said? He's in prison, dude. Like, you're in the same lane to go into the same direction as this guy in prison. Like, you need to change. And that was when it just hit me. Like, you need to help these kids shift out of that because they're still young and impressionable. They don't really have this severe addiction yet. They think it's cool, it feels good, or whatever their story is. And the behaviors come. And what I started to notice that every kid that was there for drugs, they wanted me to focus on drugs. And I would notice, like, what's the family like? What other things are going on? What's your mood most of the time? And I started seeing there's an underlying issue. The drugs was a symptom. That wasn't the problem. Like, oh yeah, stop drugs. Big deal. Let's say they do. If I could, wave a wand and be like, you're done, they would do something else because the problem still exists.
Yeah.
And that was the thing we could never really get to in that setting, for me anyway. I couldn't really get down to something deep because by the time I got a kid to talk, there is almost time to go home. And then they're like, whatever.
And they just go home and reuse and just be around that environment again.
Yep. And a lot of times it's the family. It's the family that causes a kid to misbehave, act out, whatever it is. And we all know that. We were teenagers ourselves. It's like, oh, I don't want to listen to my parents. It's like you want to defy them. Like that's like a rite of passage of being a teenager. It's like, I want to be defiant because it's cool, and that's, even though when you really look at it, like, let's stay out late. Like now I'm like, why would we do that? Like, I like to sleep. What are you talking about? So yeah, after I worked there, I taught at the university, and it was great. I loved teaching at the university. It was so cool. It was probably one of my favorite jobs, because I'm out there like giving back all this knowledge that I learned of like actual useful information. It wasn't me just, okay, chapter 4, look at page. And I hated that teacher too. When I would take those classes and look on Canvas, here's like 19 assignments that you have to do. I would give them like one assignment and the rest was just stories. And that's my thing. That if you go look me up on Rate My Professor, like everyone will say like, it's about the stories. He had so many cool stories, and it's the stories is what matters. That's what we learn from, really, if you think about it. Like, you learn from a story because you can picture it in your mind. If I just tell you, here's this, here's that, and bam, you're done. But it's like if I taught you what schizophrenia was, you could see disorganized speech. You could see that they might be hallucinating in their eyes. But if I tell you a story about a guy, and I could make you shake in your boots if you want, but it's like some of the stories are just like, whoa, what? Or even when you see it in person, you're like, holy crap, that's what that looks like. You just don't picture it when you're studying it. So I eventually ended up finding, a treatment center that I now we work at. And working with teenagers there is very similar to how the setting is, like as far as like prison was, because they live there. Like the greatest thing about it is I never have a missing appointment. Like I would hate it. I'd be sitting there waiting for an appointment and then they no show on me. And I'm like, crap, because you don't get paid if you don't have an appointment show up. So I was like, well, this sucks, So I was like, all right, but they live there. It's like, where are they? Like, all right, I'm going to go find them. And I just go grab them like, come on, let's go. And we just go talk. And it's great because I get to watch them in more than just my setting. It's not just the office setting. I can go outside. I can watch them in PE. I can watch them who they're hanging out with at lunch. So I get to see them in that nonverbal communication stuff where they don't know I'm watching. I know it sounds creepy, but you learn a lot by watching people when they don't know you're watching.
Yeah, it's your job. You're allowed to do that.
Like, I'm not saying go out there and be a peeping Tom. All right. So I'm saying watching people in different settings will give you a lot of information. Like they could say one thing to me and you, but they will be very different in someone else's presence. Whether this cool guy that I look up to is there, or there's a girl sitting over there nearby. They're not talking, but it's just like, how it is, right?
Yeah.
Like you see this at the gym, like guys
all the time
screaming and yelling when they lift weights just because there's a hot girl like 10 feet away. And it's like, God, barbarian.
A mating call.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. You'll see guys come in and they'll be fully dressed and or let's say they have the sweater on.
Right.
Now, so something a sweater is also called in the gym is a pump cover. Because you get pumped first and then you take it off because now your muscles look big and you're
Yeah.
peacocking to everybody.
Oh my goodness.
So that's something that people really do that. Like, it's pretty sad.
They put their leg up and Captain Morgan everyone. Like, hey,
Well, they have the
girl.
booty shorts on, those rugby shorts. Well, something too that happens is like they'll just have a regular t-shirt on, and all of a sudden you'll just see them start tucking it in. You know, they got a good lift, and now they start tucking in the sleeves. And I'm like,
Yeah.
man, what are you doing?
It's, I'll tell you another funny story about nonverbal communication. When I was just like watching people, watching at school is cool, but man, I've been to a lot of gyms in different parts of the country, but here in Utah County, it is a whole other kind of like experience because 20-something-year-olds are like looking for someone to marry. And it's
Oh, yeah.
so
Especially here.
interesting. Yeah. Well, like dating here is like an Olympic sport. I'm so glad I didn't have
That's
to
a
do
good way
it.
to look at it.
Yeah,
Actually,
they're like, I gotta date you, and then I gotta date you, and it's like, all right, here we go. But I go to the gym and I would just sit on the bike and I'd just be watching everyone around, and it's so interesting. Like another really interesting to watch is couples that are new, not couples that have been dating a long time or married a long time. It's the ones that are like new-ish or they're flirting, and the gym is totally like the guy's doing like the same workout for 15 minutes because he's waiting for that girl to turn around at the right time, but she's too busy bending over stretching, and it's like, okay guys, just go over and talk. Like,
Yeah.
but it's fun to watch.
And I know we might get a little bit of flack because people are like, well, you know, we really are just doing our own thing. We go to the gym for us. Like, but I've seen plenty of times when someone is completely peacocking for it. And I have stories on that I could go into where I've had to leave the gym because I couldn't stop laughing. Because it was an obvious attempt to get all the attention in the room.
Yeah, it's fun.
So rounding up this back now to the children.
Back to-
Okay, so you've been at a treatment center now for how long?
Almost 3 years.
3 years. Okay. So tell us something that you've noticed. Like, is there any common patterns in the children that you've been working with?
Oh man, it's hard to say because, like, first of all, you got to look at where the kids are coming from, and that's a list of things, right? So where are they coming from? Who's paying for them to come? One of the big chunks of kids that we get are adoption services from California. So kids that are having trouble at home, trouble in school, trouble with drugs, and California's adoption services is willing to pay for them to come get treatment over here, which it is kind of expensive. So you don't see like your average, middle class household saying, yeah, let's send our kid to treatment, because they don't even make that, let alone afford to pay that and still live at home. The other thing is obvious wealthy people sending their kids over.
Yeah. And that's something I've noticed, that there's such a spectrum of like kids who just have nothing in their lives and it's the adoption system's paying for it, or just kids who own, like, they could buy me how much money they have. Like, it has been insane. I think there was one kid who came through, and obviously I won't say his name, but like his great grandpa or something owned like tons of the real estate, which is now Hollywood.
Yep.
And he was just like, oh, so, and he, one thing he mentioned, that one reason he never had ambition in his life is because he knew the second he turned 18, he's like, I'm set.
Yeah.
And he openly said that. And he admitted that that was part of his problem, that he's like, I know I'm getting all this money when I turn 18. Like, he knows he is set for life. There's nothing he could accomplish that could ever equivalent to what he's going to get just by turning 18.
Yeah. And there's no motivation to do something great with that either. Like, some people, to start a business, to do what they want, that capital money in the beginning is what they need. And this kid's just gifted that. And there's several kids that are like that. And they all come in with this persona of like, yo, I'm a bad, I'm from the hood. And then I'll look up their address and be like, yeah, let's check out that mansion you live in the hood. Like, you kidding me? Like, your living room's bigger than my entire house, but whatever. So it's interesting to see those different demographics like you're seeing. And there's one other type of kid that we get is a school district kid. So they're not doing great in school, and it's a California district usually too. And they will pay for their services to come over and have treatment with us as well. So, I mean, those are the three. So, adoption services, school district, and private pay are the main ways that people will come in.
So the school district forks up the money too?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought it was just the state.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's got to be something intertwined with the state or whatever, but it's anything to get the kid help is what they're looking at. And if it helps with their school, like it's school focus for those kids usually, but there's this underlying problem. Like you suck at school because you're too busy getting high all the time. It's like, it's not that you need help in school. It's that you need help in the thing that is stopping you from school, which is drugs are so cool. But why did they do drugs? Back it up one more step. And it's usually the family. And that's the common thread that I've seen. And sometimes when I'm working with the families, that you get them talking about the kid, and this is what's wrong, and this is the patterns. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, well, what would you do? And I would hear what they would do. And I'm like, I'm collecting data the whole time that they're staying with us. And I'm going, okay, here's where the parent messed that up. And here's where they messed that up. And here's where you said this wrong in that conversation. And I'm like, I see what's going on.
So
and I slowly just figure out the puzzle and go, you're most of the problem or not, depending on what's going on.
I know not every case is the same, but that's something I've noticed too, where, and I'm just going to full blown and say it, like, I feel like a vast majority of the time, it's just the parent's fault.
Yeah.
Like, and something we mentioned too, like, obviously we have kids who are going through the adoption systems and who knows what abuse they went through with that. There's so many horror stories that come out of that. But one thing too, is that with the people who are just wildly successive, for some of the kids that we have, it's that their parents forgot to be parents while they're being CEOs,
right?
Where they were chasing, that money, and they'll just openly say like, oh yeah, like I don't know how to raise my kid. Some of them don't know their kids. I feel like in some ways when working at this facility that you find that this is like their parents' first opportunity to really get to know their child.
Yeah. And who knows how to raise a kid anyway? They don't pop out with a manual or anything. Like, it's not easy. You just do what you were raised as, thinking that was the right way. And you try to like take the best of what your parents did and leave out the stuff that wasn't so cool. And, that may be the problem too. Cause like we also grew up in a generation, maybe I'm a little older than you guys, but
just a wee bit,
in a generation where, like spankings were normal and, walk it off, rub some dirt in it kind of thing. And it's like,
we're the same age.
No, because we're not the same age. But we got the same whoopings.
You can't do that with the kids nowadays because they're soft and everything's all nerfed up in the world. And they're like, everyone gets a trophy. And it's like, what? Yeah. No, you got to learn how to lose. You got to know how to stand up to someone who's picking on you. You can't just eliminate bullying because it's in increments. It's like it's going to kind of be there where guys are giving crap to each other and they're like, hey, your mom or whatever. And it's like, it's not like hardcore bullying, but it's like the beginnings of it. But you got to know how to snap back and stand up for yourself and learn as a kid. And that's, some of the things that I talk about with the kids is like, you're giving your power away when you let it affect you. And that's hugely what most of them do is they made fun of me. Ooh, and they want to get sad, which we do get sad inside because that hurt. They said something and that hit the right spot and like, dang it. But that kid who's trying to get that reaction out of you, they see it and go, oh, I know what button to push every single time I want this kid to go off. And they'll do it just because they're bored. And if you don't let them and you don't let them feel that, like I win, I made him cry again or whatever their goal is. And you just like, whatever. Because we worked with these kids before, right? Like they talk crap to us.
Oh yeah.
And it's like,
man.
They're good
yeah.
at it
If
too.
you have a low self-esteem working at a treatment facility, it's not for you.
Yeah. They will find your button. Like,
oh, absolutely.
I've gotten mad twice and I felt it coming and I was like, ooh, I need to back up. Like,
choke them out.
How did I let that happen?
Yeah, that's why you don't work with children.
Yeah. So it's an interesting dynamic, but it's not always the parents' fault. It's just that the parents didn't know what else to do. And that's what I tell the kid. I was like, when the kid's mad at their parent, like, why'd you send me here? This place sucks. And I'm like, well, for one, it sucks here because if we made it like a 5-diamond resort, you wouldn't want to go home. And you're not here to just enjoy it. You're here to learn. It's like boot camp. Like we're here to train you to go back home and do well. And at the end of the treatment, I focus on the parents and I'm like, all right, here's what you need to start focusing on. Here's what you need to say. Here's what you need to do. Have you ever done this? Or I'll even ask, it was recent. I asked these 2 parents, I said, let me ask you a question. How do you guys fight?
Oh, wow.
And when you get a couple, like if a couple says we don't fight, bullshit.
They're lying to you.
Then something's wrong. Either you guys don't see each other
Or you're cheating.
what, right?
You guys are cheating. That's how you're staying happy.
So it's like, how do you fight? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, do you ever like fight? And then you're like, hey kids, go to your room. We're going to be talking. And they were like, yeah, we don't let them watch us arguing and stuff. And I was like, that's where your mistake is. And they're like, well, how so? And I'm like, well, you don't want them to see you argue, but they know you are. They can hear.
And they're not learning how to resolve it then.
They're not seeing the resolve. And that's the biggest piece. If you don't show them how to make up and be happy again and hug again, they're missing out on a relationship building skill for the rest of their life.
You're right. I never thought of it that way.
That makes
That they are learning a reconciliation skill right there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because you feel like the mature thing to do is be like, yeah, go to your room, kids. Like we're going to talk this out. Put on boxing gloves. No, I'm just joking. But like I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so. Oh, okay.
Because if you imagine the kids that never, I've met a kid that he said his parents never fight, and I'm like, whoa. And I asked the parents. That was what cued me to ask those parents was like, do you guys fight? And they're like, of course. I'm like, okay, he's never seen you fight. So what's that about? And then, if he grows up and has like a girlfriend or something or a boyfriend, whatever, and the first sign of an argument, they think it's over. They're like, oh, well, it's over. There's this, we're fighting. We're just done. They don't know how to resolve it or that the other person says we're done because you don't know how to resolve this. You just keep the fight going, or you just pretend it goes away because that's what they saw was go to your room. It's like, oh, we're fighting. I'll just go to my room and tomorrow will be good. And
we wake up tomorrow and it never happened.
There's no.
Wow. I'm not gonna lie. That makes me look back in my own childhood.
Uh-oh.
I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I know we're about to have a moment. When I was 5. No, no. I think that's actually a really inspired thing to say. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
And that like the kids need to be able to see like and I guess quote unquote failures, but to see how you overcome them. Because if it's always just like, no, you're only allowed to see mommy and daddy when we're being perfect, when we're happy, that's not realistic. And they don't learn those realistic skills to how to resolve an issue. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Well, and really, if you look at how life is with anyone, no matter what you do, you can't look at it as a failure because we learn from our mistakes. Mistakes not a failure. You're only a failure when you quit.
Yeah.
So keep moving yourself forward. Like you watch a baby learn how to walk. They start walking, they fall on their butt. Do they just go, that's it, I'm never going to walk. I'm just not that kid. No, they just keep trying until they do. And this is, I do jujitsu. I've done this for 15 years. And I teach people in jujitsu, like you either win or you learn. You don't ever lose. The one who's losing is at home on the couch. They're not here. But that goes for any field though. Like if you're in a situation and you make a mistake or you didn't quite get it, well, great. That's good information for you to learn from and just make tweaks so that you do better the next time. And that's how being successful is just keep moving forward.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love that. So I guess, Eric, do you have a question?
No, I was going to say, so I guess for future references, let's say, there's a bunch of kids out there who are going to have their kid at the age of, let's say, 19 or 20. What would be something that you would want to teach these newer parents so they can have the best out of their kids or get the best out of their kids?
Yeah, like one piece of advice, like something solid.
Yeah. Well, first of all, 19 or so having kids is like most of Utah County. I know that's rough. Sorry, but that's what I've seen. It's like, hurry up. We gotta,
right? 19. My good years are passing me up.
Well, and it's a cultural thing here. I think, I didn't grow up with that where it was so many kids per family. Like the amount of kids in a family is insane to me. I grew up in a town where it was like 1, maybe 2 kids in the family, except for the LDS families. They had like 7 or 8 of them.
Got
like,
a whole football
wow,
field.
that's
good.
You got your own soccer team.
Yeah, you ever saw them with the Mormon assault vehicles, like the big vans that they always carry?
Yeah. Which is cool. Like, I think it's like a different kind of learning growing up with that many siblings. Like I had 2 sisters, but they were much older, like 13 and 15 years older. So I was basically an only child, but having kids, like my advice would be get yourself straight first, figure out what you want to do, enjoy your spouse or partner or enjoy yourself before you even go to that. And and figure out what you want. Because at the end of the day, you got to look at like, what is it that you want in life?
Yeah.
Instead of just what's close or what's easy or what's going to give you the most money. Because you can have all of those things and start a family in a heartbeat. But if you're not happy doing what you're doing away from your family, you come back to your family not so happy also. And that's probably the biggest thing that you want to be able to pass on to your kids is do what you want to do and show the world that you can be happy and impactful in your way.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's deep.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Also, I do got one more question.
Go ahead.
And I've been thinking about this for years.
I know you're going to say it.
Okay. Wait.
No, go ahead. No, go
I'm,
ahead.
I'm curious.
No.
now.
Okay. Are you going to ask? Never mind. Go ahead.
Okay.
I shouldn't interrupt you.
All right, so check this out. All right, so in the Polynesian culture, Hispanic culture, and Black culture, we beat our kids' asses, right?
Okay.
So I don't see a lot of that in Mormon culture. So do you think beating your kids' ass is a good thing or a bad thing? Honest answer, go.
So now we're going into
Spankings.
Yeah, sorry, spankings.
I knew exactly that's where you're going.
Okay, I just got to know.
Yeah.
'Cause I got my ass beat growing up.
Spankings kind of leans into physical abuse, kind of. And in most cases, it does get to that point. We have two big things in life that will make us do or stop doing things. It's either pain or pleasure. If it feels good enough, you keep doing it more. If it hurts enough, you'll stop and change. And the idea of spanking, which if you look at operant conditioning in psychology, that's your positive punishment category where you're adding something painful to make them decrease a behavior. So, they did something wrong and you think that that's going to solve the problem. And in some very small, and this is my opinion, some small cases that might work. In most of the time, the kid is associating making a mistake with you don't love me.
Oh, wow. Is it really that deep?
Yeah. Well, they won't be able to articulate it that way, especially if they're younger, but it's like, I can't ever make a mistake in front of you because you will punish me for it. And no one wants to be punished. It's better off if you were able to teach them something in that and give them, a different consequence if it was necessary for a punishment, if they did something wrong. But it's like I said, you either win or you learn, and those are learning moments. It's not a losing moment. If you're spanking and you're causing harm to your kid, they look at it as I'm losing. I'm not good enough and my parents don't love me. And they don't say it like that, but that's the inner feeling.
That's the inner feeling that
you're
what they
planting
have,
those
yeah.
seeds.
At their core.
Yep.
And so do you think so do you believe that spanking then has those long-term effects that it creates anxiety or depression inside of children?
Yes, it probably
Or anger issues,
Yeah.
like other things as well.
I have my own thoughts on like anger and anxiety as well. Cause like at what point do you cause, where does it become like a diagnosis and stuff? Because when you're clinically trained, like, what criteria to look at for that stuff and what's depression versus just feeling kind of down. And where's the line? And everyone's different with that. But, like if you add spanking to your regimen and trying to, teach your kids and learn and stuff like that, there's resentment that builds. Resentment is behind anger. Anger comes from two different emotions depending on what starts it. And it's either fear or hurt. That the sadness is the other one. So fear and hurt and then sadness, like those are the two things that will spark fear into like anger because they're afraid to get spanked. So they get angry and tough. And like dad goes, that's right. You be tough. And it's like,
Oh, and it builds up a toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
right.
Oh.
And if you're getting beat at home,
Wow.
that kid's going to school and bullying the next kid. So he feels successful.
And you believe that too, that it transpired.
Oh,
It goes
yeah.
further on.
Man, that's
Wow.
crazy.
We see it at our job. You put one
Yeah.
kid in a community where there are softer kids and
Yeah.
they bully those kids. But then when you move that kid out and put him with the harder kids, that kid turns into the victim. And it's like, well, which one are you, dude? Like,
Are you the bully or the victim?
yeah. And which one do you hate more? And why don't you just stop both and just be a good kid and follow the rules? Like, that's generally where I try to like push them down that lane, but it's hard to break that out of them because they were raised developmentally and, with their family. and something could trigger the kid, like the dad raising his voice, or the mom with the wooden spoon gonna stir the spaghetti, but it's like, oh no, there's the spoon.
Yeah, no, wooden spoon. My mama was a villain with that.
That hurt the fingers.
So I'm thankful. I only got the wooden spoon once in my life. My brother got it way more than I did. Probably my sister did too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I only got the wooden spoon once, but I got some spankings.
Yeah.
That's weird though. Like, I'm thinking about it from my point of view because I grew up in the '90s, and I got whooped a lot by grandparents, and of course, mom and dad. But I was a bad kid though. It's not like I resented them. I was like, oh, I hate you guys, but I know I messed up.
Right.
So I think what you're saying earlier is it's very rare that it's okay to whoop them. I'm assuming it's okay to whoop them if you can explain to them why they messed up and if you tried every other option.
I guess, yeah. What is that small percentage then that you talked about? And again, this is just your opinion.
I don't know what the percentage would be. It just when you talk to kids that were spanked or beaten or whatever it was, because and so depending on the parent too, right? Like if the parent's using alcohol or something like that, it turns into a beating.
Oh, that's different. Yeah.
Yeah. I meant like straight up like a legitimate father and mother figure.
So there
can whoop you.
Yeah.
Like
there isn't like a moment, and this is just a scenario I kind of want to set up for you. So let's say a kid messes up, breaks something valuable of the father or mother's that he knew not to touch, or she. The father lets the anger pass, because I've often heard you should not, if you're going to spank your kid, don't spank them in anger in that moment.
Yeah.
So like, let's say they let 30 minutes pass and they come and like, hey, this is what happened. You're going to get a whooping for this, but we need to talk about it. Like, is there any healthy way to approach it, or is it just any sort of way to that and it's just hurtful? I guess how would you explain that in your opinion, those moments of approaching it?
I had a neighbor across the street that his parents actually got like this 2-inch thick belt, and
Wow.
and like, but it was like you said, it wasn't in the anger moment. Like it was like, you're getting 2 spanks today, and I was like, what? Like that was weird. Like, why announce it? Like if I was getting spanked, it was like you just got it. Like it was like
your dad came
what?
up and just
whack, and you're like,
Got you
oh,
right.
there it is. Like, what did I do? And you immediately assess what you just did and try not to do that again. And it was so weird. Like I was over at his house and she's like, all right, we'll go out back. And I could see like their curtain was like kind of see-through. And I could see him out in the backyard, like drop his drawers, and mom just whack. And I was like, that is so weird. Like she like planned it, set it up, like, all right, present the item and whack. And I'm like, what is this?
Present your ass.
Yeah, like
Right.
it was so weird. But and then he falls down, cries, and then she's like, one more, get up. And I'm like, this is so strange to me. And it was like, I don't personally see that that's the way to do it. Like, I've like kind of like, slapped my kids on the butt, but not hard. And it definitely came from an anger like moment. And it's not healthy. It doesn't teach them anything except for that I can cause you pain.
And have you ever had to go back and apologize to your kids?
I didn't hit them hard.
Okay.
So it was just like, hey, it's like if you were to reach and grab my drink and I smacked your hand, it wasn't like I would hit them like to where they were like, oh my God, there's your handprint on my,
That's
like.
actually, I actually like that way of doing it better. Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's almost like the Caesar Malone thing that he does. Like,
Yeah. That calm assertive energies, yeah. It's a great maneuver on dogs. My son's been watching that because we have a dog, and I'll be talking or he'll be talking, and I interrupt sometimes, and he's like talking and he starts talking, he goes, and he's like, and I'm like, what the heck? Like, but it worked. Like I shut up. I was like, okay, you go.
No way. Your kid's training you like a dog.
He's smart. So it's good.
Smart.
He hears you talking. He knows what to do now.
Yeah.
So, Arthur, kind of taking it back now, through your time of working with kids, I guess, and this is a very general question, but what are some of the most common mental illnesses that you'll run into with kids nowadays?
That's so loaded.
I know it's hard, but I'm asking you this for a reason.
So in general, in the field, you're going to hear depression, anxiety, kind of like how you just threw it out
those
there.
were my first two.
Here's what I have learned as well, that insurances that pay for therapy need to have certain diagnoses on the top line as one of the diagnoses before they will pay for services. I can't remember. I remember I was an intern. I diagnosed this person, and I was like, wow, this is dead on, like to the T. This one I was like so proud to show my supervisor. And my supervisor's like, are you sure there's not any depression or anxiety in there? And I was like, and I thought he saw something that I missed it. So I was like, oh, I get to learn something here. I was like, no, though. I really think this is dead on. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna be real. Insurance isn't gonna pay for their treatment. So
Oh, are you serious?
they won't. I mean, if you diagnose that, this is the last time you see them. And I was like, what? So it's almost like if you want to work and get paid, like you misdiagnose them with a mild depression or anxiety so that you can treat the second thing on the list, which is what you really think is wrong with them.
So strange.
Wow.
Now, I didn't do that, but I bet you there's people that have.
But it also seems too that like in your case, that wouldn't have necessarily been the wrong thing to do. If you wanted to keep the kid to help him,
Right.
you had to give it to him.
It
Like,
is
you
kind
would have
of-
needed to give him the
It's
diagnoses.
kind of doing the right thing, but not at the same time because you're just
So it's like a noble lie.
kind of.
Yeah, I get it. Because if you really want to deal with the issue, you got to lie and say, well, he's actually got this, but really it's this other root thing.
Yeah. I didn't do it
Wow.
because I never want someone to come back and check and be like,
Yeah.
"Oh,"
And
I'm
get
like,
caught up.
I didn't want to get in trouble for anything. Like I stay pretty. I was at the prison. I don't ever want to go there, so I'm going to tell the truth.
Yeah. But that's crazy to me. So insurances will just cover stuff for like major anxiety or chronic anxiety and depression.
There's certain ones, and then every insurance company is probably different. So I don't know what's what. But my supervisor is very experienced, so he knew like the thing that I put there. And again, I don't remember what I had diagnosed, but it was one of those not so common ones. And he was like, "Yeah, they won't pay for that."
Wow.
So it's like, crap. Well, all right. Well, good knowing you. See you later. Good luck with that mental problem, but that's how it goes.
That's crazy to me.
Until it gets worse or something else shows up.
Well, and I feel like until there's a major incident now.
Well, if that's an incident kind of diagnosis, it could be that if you are struggling with something mentally over time, you could have depression because you're sick of this other thing and you're just down on yourself. So like depression could show up organically.
Mhm.
So, I mean, but what you're supposed to do is wait till that happens and then you can do it. And then the insurance will pay for it. And yeah, there's some weird stuff. Insurances will tell me like, okay, what's the diagnosis? You give them the diagnosis and they're like, all right, we'll give you 6 sessions on that. And I'm like, 6? Like, that's hardly scratching the surface. Like, I'm getting to know them on the first 2.
Yeah.
And you want me to do the rest? Like, what do you think? I have a magic wand? But yeah, and that's why I like the treatment center better, is because I can talk to them more often in different settings that you get more work done. And I have more people around too. Like I could utilize a staff member or a teacher or another therapist that they're running that group. And it's like, I've got a whole team of people helping this kid. It's not just me with a client. And then when they leave, they're out in the world with people who are probably causing some of the toxicity in their life or the pain that they're going through. So
a question I have for you: what do you do with parents who don't want to change? Because I know like when their kids show up, and I know you've had instances, we've talked about it, where you had a kid, obviously who was very open about his sexuality, and his dad's like, fix him,
yeah,
like make him not that
I've
way.
got a couple of stories on that.
Gotta pray it away.
Okay, this is a quick story. I had 2 parents and a kid that was like 6 years old show up in the outpatient. And we sit down and I'm like, all right, guys, what's going on? Like, how can I help? And they were like, fix them. They literally said that.
They
And I
did
was
just point him like, fix him.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, hey, buddy, like, go over there out there in the lobby and there's a coloring book. I want you to color me your best picture. And then I shut the door and I was like, guys, first of all, if you want me to do any good here, you need to change your language. You cannot talk. Fix him. Like as if he's broken.
What's like
You
it
raised
dehumanized him.
Well, yeah, but like you raised this. This is your fault. If he's 6, he didn't develop some psychopath behavior. You raised this into him. What are
Wow.
you doing? They never came back, obviously.
No, yeah, because you told him the truth.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you tell people the truth. They're like, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
We'll just go offer someone a bigger paycheck to shut up and do what we say.
Right?
Yeah.
It can't be me. I can't be
Because
me.
let's say I did fix him. Like it's such a common thing to say in the field too. Like, oh, I cured him. But if I did fix him and put him back at home, they're gonna ruin him again because they didn't change.
Wow.
Because like
Yeah.
if you look at the family system as like a spider web, right? And you say that kid's the one that is needing help. That's usually the scapegoat of the whole family. The rest of them are doing their own role. And if I move the kid, imagine that spider web. The spider web's going to change and morph with how I move the kid, which changes your role and your role and your role. And I've essentially ruined the whole rest of the family because I changed one person. And that's why if the family's the problem, you have to change it as a family system. And that's where you go into like marriage and family therapists. They're very system focused. But when you recognize that, you have to jump on it and say, hey, like, you can't be as rough as I did to that family that one time. But, I'll mention it to families like, hey, did you ever think that maybe how you did things as a kid is starting to show up here, and that's why you're so angry? And I start to give them that fuel to give themselves like, hey, maybe I did do this. And I've had them flat out admit like, yeah, I probably messed them up. And I'm like, oh, great. The cool thing is we can fix it because you admitted it. You're being 100% responsible. Perfect. Be yourself, show them the way, and love them to success. You're not going to get anything else.
And what would you say to people who are like, oh, he's on that flower stuff, like there he is, like, oh, love your kid to this and that, like, but it's a real thing though.
Yeah, and like I studied a little bit in positive psychology, and I mean, go back to Psychology 101, operant conditioning and positive reinforcement. Like that is the best way to change behavior, is by giving them rewards for stuff that they do to increase that behavior. And if it feels good, and the feel good just depends. It's like, is candy what makes you feel good? Like, I'll give you more candy if you do more homework. And they're like, hell yeah, I'm going to do more homework. Or is it money or whatever their thing is? Unfortunately, the bad behaviors is drugs is the thing that rewards them.
Yeah.
So they keep doing that. So
in that moment then, when you find, like, again, let's go back to that scenario. Kid broke something of yours that he knew not to touch. Like, you're in that moment. What do you do? Because is there a form? Because you can't give him like, hey, man, it's okay. It'll be better. Here's some candy for it. Like, you're not going to positively reinforce that. What do you do in those moments?
Well, you kind of learn that, when you talk to them and get to their level and say, hey, did you realize what you just did? Did you realize that this is something that's valuable and it costs money, right? Like for us to have here, depending on what it is, like I broke a window when I was a kid. And it's like, that keeps the cold out in the winter. And I'm like, oh, like that makes sense. And it's like, now it costs money to replace it. And, my punishment at that time, instead of spankings, was because my dad didn't watch it happen, but he came home and was like, what the hell? And I'm like, yeah, my bad. Soccer is cool. And, he was like, all right, well, you're going to do yard work to pay it off. So I would, haul and split wood or whatever for the winter. But you sit the kid down and you kind of like, you educate them. Like you educate them on what just happened, what they did, and do they understand it's wrong. Now, depending on their age is going to vastly change, from, 3 years old all the way up to 10, you're going to see a huge difference of how they respond. And you just explain it. You just educate them and say, hey, like, do you understand that this was not good? And this is not how we want to behave to break our stuff. Our stuff is very valuable. Like imagine, and you take one of their items, imagine I broke this toy. And they'd be like, oh no, and they're like, well, yeah, but that's kind of how it feels when you break something in the house. It's like, I paid for that. And I'm like, oh no, you broke it. So how do we fix this? And that's another part of the language that parents need to learn is we, not how do you fix this, or I do this for you, you listen, like the you and me and all that stuff that they do, it's we're on the same team.
Yeah.
If you are building a relationship with someone, it's win-win or lose-lose. You don't ever have, and it goes back to like the parents arguing. I ask families or whatever, I even ask newlyweds that are, like, oh, so how do you fight? And they're like, oh, well, I usually win. I'm like, oh yeah, you usually win. And I let them dig that hole for a minute. And I'm like, you do realize that you're losing, right? Because at some point in the relationship, if I'm winning, you're losing, and we're on the same team. Now, if you're losing, we're both losing. So you have to think that
beautiful.
Mentality.
You should put that on a coffee mug.
It's always about win-win.
Put that on a coffee mug for us. Wear that on a t-shirt. I like that.
Yeah.
So you got to look at this like we're all a team here, because I think that's so common. I think even as a staff, like we'll see staff members do that. Yeah. Like, so what are you going to do? Like we're isolating them, making them feel alone. But we got to start using that language of what are we going to do? Well,
and let's step it up another notch. Let's look at how your body language is in that moment. like I said, come down to their level. Don't talk down to them. Like you want to come down like, hey, bud, like you get down to their level. And not only that, I would never talk to a kid this way. I would talk to a kid this way. Like, hey, what are we going to do? We're both facing the same direction, meaning we're on the same side.
Well, and this is also, so like, as you know, because I have you help me with this, but at the boarding school we work at, like I help with the like on hands portion, that when a kid is just like they're self-harming and they're doing something, I have to help them out. But one thing too is that it comes down to like, what do we do to de-escalate someone? Obviously it doesn't just mean like like if someone's gone like too high up or like in an aggressive way, it could just also be they're feeling anxious. When we have kids who feel anxious, they want to self-harm, they want to run, they want to do stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And the idea is like, how do we bring this down together? And I teach that, which is mirroring and matching, that you got to be doing what they're doing. Now, it's not like mimicking every way, that every time you do something, I'm going to follow you and move the same way.
Copycat.
Yeah, we're not doing that. But essentially, like you said, like we're facing the same way.
Yeah.
We're going to be eye level. And then we're going to start using like, so what do we do from here?
Yeah, there's a lot of nonverbals in that too. Like it's not just your body language. It's not just your mirroring. It's like your voice tone. You match their voice tone. Or if they're escalated high and you talk low, you're bringing them down to you. You're having them mirror you essentially. Like, how can I help? Help me help you, right?
Yeah.
Because we are going to get through this, right? Like the we is where they feel like, okay, you're on my side. And that's subconscious stuff. They don't normally, especially under a high stress situation, they don't pay attention to those details consciously. They're gonna start hearing like, okay, you just said we, like, oh, I know you got my back, you're cool, and then they'll calm down. And then after that, you can get them to talk a little more and have more to say. So it's just, it's practice, and everyone's different. So not everything works on every kid. Like I've had some real money tricks up my sleeve, and I can be a ninja with my mind about it. And then it doesn't work on a kid. I'm like, what the heck? Like, all right, we gotta just back up, shift, and go back in. And like, here we go. Like, you can't get mad at it. It's just like, you're just different.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I think that's so amazing though. Like how you have these different tactics, but at the end of it, like it's a we thing. This is a team effort. I think there's such a big disconnect, especially not just at treatment centers, but I think people will have that with their kids, and they'll try to say like, oh, I remember when I was a kid. And that is in its own form. It feels like a disconnect because you're like, oh, so you kind of remember what it's like, but you don't know, you're not me. Because how often do we run into this? Like, yo, you don't know what this feels like. Or I hear it all the time.
Well, that's cheating when you say the I feel statements too, when you want to win an argument or whatever, or kids will use that against us. Like, I feel like this. And you go, no, you don't. And like, you can't tell me how to feel. And they're 100% right. You can't tell them how to feel.
Yeah.
So they can feel their feelings, and that's okay. But now what? What do we do? And you go into the feelings with them and like, let's tell me more about the feelings. And when they say like, you don't know how I feel, you're like, you're right. I don't know. Help me understand. And now they're bringing you on their journey with them. Like, well, here's this and here's that. And this sucks. If they're being real combative, I can tell you a story. I had a girl that was coming in. You could tell something else was big underneath. There was some trauma there. Something happened and she wouldn't tell me. And she went into, well, you wouldn't understand. And I'm like, I totally can understand. And I know how you feel. And I messed up by saying, I know how you feel. And then she blew up at me. Like,
even if it was true, right?
I mean, yeah, even if it was true. And I recognized when she blew up, I was like, oh crap, that was what they taught us in school. Don't say that ever, And it was like, yeah, you're right. I don't know how you feel. And what she said, you don't know how I feel. Have you ever been raped? And I was like, whoa, okay, there it is. And I was like, all right, no, I haven't. But even if I did, would it be the same? And she was like, no.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, so help me understand you. It doesn't matter what I went through. Help me understand you. I'm on your side. Let's go through this together. Tell me your story. And then I sit there quiet. She told me the whole thing.
Wow. One good save on that.
Holy crap. Yeah, I almost blew it. It was bad.
Good.
Yeah, I would not have thought of that. I probably would have puckered up just like you did. Like, oh. Well, same time next week.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing I guess the prison taught me is don't react out here. Like I would react inside. Like I had a guy ask me a question that scared the crap out of me. Inside I was going, holy crap. But on the outside I was like,
playing it cool.
Just trying to be cool. Keep the poker face, because man, if they see that they got to you, they own you, and it's bad. But same kind of thing as like when someone tells me something very traumatic, they're almost waiting for this big reaction out of me.
Like the gasp effect.
And I'm
yeah.
like, oh yeah, I've been raped. And I go, okay. And they're like waiting for this. Oh my God, are you okay? You know, like, why would I do that? Like you're telling me the story. Let's just talk about it. Like whatever you want to tell me. And then they kind of go, oh, well, maybe I should tell him more because he's not reacting.
It's not getting that shock factor.
It's not happening. And then they tell me more and more and more. And by then I have the whole story. I'm like, wow, I can't imagine what you've been through. I can't imagine how that feels. Right. Those are the words you're supposed to say. But you can't say, oh, I know how you feel. Don't ever say that. Don't ever
totally get it. No, just kidding. Every bit. Speaking to the choir right now. Wow. No, I think one, like, kind of being able to take away from that too, but also put it into that, like, even if we did go through, like, if we had a similar experience, it's not the same one still.
Right.
And still being able to, like, find a way to relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that understand, like, I'm just trying to get down to your level. So, if you had a big piece of advice, so we always talked about, like, we already gave the piece of advice for the parents.
Mm-hmm.
For kids who are listening to this, what is a piece of advice you have for them?
Listen to your parents. I mean, it's hard to say there too, right?
I know that's like, again a loaded question.
You've got at least 3 people in the mix, and to give advice to any one of them, there's a dynamic there, and there's different personalities, different genders, different belief systems, different upbringings. Like there's so many variables that come into it. But when you're talking to kids, it depends on their situation. Like I always customize. I've done so many things in my life, different jobs and different background and stuff. Like I have experiences that you guys would be like, oh, wow, I didn't know that about you. And I can relate to just about anyone when I talk to them. So when I get a kid that's doing this, like I probably have a friend that did the same thing in high school. And I'm like, yeah, I know exactly like what that story is going to look like down the line. And then I have my prison stories on top of that. And I'm like, hey, let me tell you a story about this guy in prison. I tell them the story. They're like, oh, dude, that's messed up. And I go, you know what's really messed up? He started out just like you.
Oh,
like,
wow.
What? And it's like, yeah, maybe you should change. And it's not like I'm saying don't be cool. I'm saying you're on a path that's not good. Follow the rules, because trust me, I worked at the prison and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I was there just doing my time just like they were. The only difference is I got to go home after. And I even call my wife and joke around with her like, hey, she's like, what are you doing? I was like, just got out of prison, you know, like, but it was true. Like there was one time there was like in my building, they were like, oh, we're on lockdown. I was like, what does that mean? They're like, I guess in another building across the way, a couple of gangs got into a fight. Some guy got his face opened up and it was just like a really bad riot happened. I'm like, so why are we locked down? Because it's nowhere near us and there's fences in between. And they're like, whenever there's a riot, they lock the entire prison down. And I was like,
wow.
What? Like, I can't go home? It was like 5 o'clock. And they're like, nope. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like,
so now you're a prisoner in the prison.
Like, so yeah, do I have a bed or what? Like, I'm not doing this.
Chow.
So I kept pushing like, guys, I gotta go. Like I had such a busy schedule outside of that, job. So I was like, I gotta get out of here. And then someone, the lieutenant or something, called the guys that drive the trucks around. He came over and manually opened the gate, which they weren't supposed to, but it was just like, it's not like, I'm clearly not one of the prisoners. Like, you know who I am. So I'm like, let me go home. And I got out of there at 6:30. It was like, I was there for an hour and a half waiting.
Just on lockdown.
Yeah, it was awful, but.
Wow.
But yeah, so answer your question, when you tell a kid like, dude, follow the rules. Not only that, follow the rules and find a dream, do what you want. Like that's the most important thing as you are growing up in life is like, find out what you want. Because like I said, I've done a lot of jobs and I know what I don't want. And it's like, well, what do you want? And that's what everyone needs to find. If you don't find that, you're stuck in I just settled job. You're stuck in a just for now job.
It's I just settled lifestyle, not just a job. It's an I just settled lifestyle.
Right. And it may be personality too. Like maybe it's a fun job and it pays crap.
Yeah.
and that makes your home life suck. And maybe you won't have a family, or maybe your family is struggling and stuff like that. So it's like really find out what you want. And when you do that, when you tap into who you actually are, your authentic self, you will thrive. You'll be a bright, shining light to people everywhere you go, and it will help everyone around you. And, not to give you too much more, but I did this like personal development training as well. That's similar to what I'm describing, is that, we develop these different ways of being in life and thinking that this is going to keep me protected. This is going to keep me safe. Cause like I said, I grew up getting bullied, and, one of the things that I use to fight against that, like let's call it a wall that I have up that stops me from feeling like the scared victim, is I did 15 years of jujitsu. So jujitsu is my wall now. I wear shirts that say jujitsu on it and stuff.
And you're sending a message.
I'm telling people, back the F up, because I can kick your ass. But that also tells the bullies to get away from me. It's not really doing that. It's just like a subconscious thing that we did. The other thing that I grew up with was I felt that I wasn't good enough or smart enough. So what did I do? I went to a bunch of school and got a bunch of degrees, and now I'm smart enough, and you can't tell me I'm stupid now. So it was another wall that kept people away. And really all I wanted was to hang out with people and enjoy friends and stuff like that, but I pushed everyone away. But it wasn't until I broke through that mentality and became who I really am. And who I really am is different. Like you even saw it. You knew me before I went to that training, and you saw me after, and it's like, I asked him, like, what do you know that's different? Like, what do you see is different in me? He's like, well, you smile more. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of true. Because I came with this hard, tough love, and I'm a badass, and I would try to straighten the kids out. And it's like, that's the punishment. That's the spankings. That's just I'm just doing it verbally now, instead of doing, showing them love and showing them how to act. Because that's the best way to teach your kid, is by modeling the behavior. I tried to teach my younger kid, I think it was like 3 or 4, maybe 4. And I said, hey, you have to be a gentleman for ladies and open the door for them and stuff like that. And he's like, why? I was like, well, let's take mom. She's our girl. Like, she's the one girl in our house, and she is the most important one as far as girls go in our house. We have to take care of her. Not that she can't take care of herself, but it's that we are being gentlemen, and we're going to open the door for her to show I care for you. And he goes, okay. And I thought, cool, I got a good lesson in. High fives, parenting all around.
Right, all done. Wrap it up.
So I'm like, all right, let's go to the store. And I noticed he just darts out the door. And I'm like, what just happened? I just told
Son
you.
Of a gun, you better
so I was
like,
I go to my car, and they're all waiting for me to hit the unlock button. And they're like, hey. And I'm like, hang on. And I click it, and I open the door for my wife and let her get in. And I shut the door. And they're watching me like, okay. We get to wherever we're going, and I put it in park, and my little one goes, Mom, wait, stop, don't move. And he jumps out of the car, runs around the car, and opens her door.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't me telling him. It was me showing him. So if you really want to show your kids how to be in life, how to be a good person, you have to model that. You be the source. If you're not, you're showing them something, Yeah. So it's like, what do you want them to be? Because what you're being in yourself, they're going to see that. Because like I said, as they are growing up, when they don't even know language, they're absorbing everything by watching you. And be careful what you say around your kids, because they're listening. I had my kid lost in a video game, watching a TV show at the same time, and then he'll comment in our conversation. And I'm like, he's listening? Like, how is he doing 3 things at once? It's crazy. But they're listening. They know how. So huge stuff. But yeah, that training that you go through, it's emotional intelligence. Like you hear about IQ. Your IQ is like usually set for life. Like you're not going to really get any smarter. Your IQ is your intelligence capability, basically. But your emotional intelligence, this is studied through Harvard, even said that your emotional intelligence can go and just shoot through the roof, because you're able to learn, you're able to open up, you're able to be who you're actually meant to be. And that's really all it's about. It's cool.
Yeah. And as we're kind of wrapping this up now, something I really took away that I loved, and kind of I'm going to put it into my own words, but I think nowadays something we're struggling with is definitely connection, how we treat one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I speaking as a guy, I'm going to say it. I think the way of how we treat women now is definitely, it's on its way out the door. It's not what it used to be. And I think for, people always say, you got to teach your sons, instead of trying to protect women, teach your sons better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best way to teach your sons is to love your wife, and how you treat her, how you act with her is how they are going to act later on.
Yeah.
In my life, I didn't grow up with a perfect household. I grew up in a broken home. And so I think I got some idiosyncrasies from that. But then I also got to watch my grandpa and my grandma and see other wonderful marriages around me. And I know there was things from that I did take also. And now thinking back, like now I definitely want to, I set that own standard in my house one day. Like just kind of thinking that. Like I didn't realize that because I guess I don't have kids. And I've noticed too, like how as just human beings, we pick up on each other's idiosyncrasies. We pick up on each other's behaviors, and not realizing that, when you have kids, they are going to pick up what you do. And when you think if something I've learned about working with kids, when you think they're not watching, that's probably when they're watching the hardest.
Yeah.
They're going to figure something out, and they're going to watch what you do, and they will use it against you. And you go, hey, don't do this. And they're like, well, do you remember on such and such day you did this? And I'm like, oh no. Like,
Yeah.
you're right. They cut me.
Yeah.
I was like, you're
Or
right.
even when they're still learning to talk and they cuss, and you're like, oh shit. I mean,
Ah, damn it. No.
yeah, they'll copy it. They'll say it the same way. Then you know which parent cussed around
Yep.
the kid because they said it like that parent. You're like, ooh, that was you that time. That wasn't me.
Yep.
I don't say that word.
Well, man.
It's true. Yeah. But here's the thing. I want to kind of bounce off of what you said. Like, yes, the treating women thing has changed, but I think our culture in society has drastically changed as well, because you're running into, like, chivalry's dying is kind of what you're saying, but it's also like the equality stuff is coming up a lot. Like, feminism has been growing, and people that identify a different gender or a different whatever, and it's like there's these different variables that are being introduced that are so foreign from what we were raised in, because that wasn't a thing back then. I mean, it probably was, but we didn't see it.
Yeah.
And we don't see it like we do as much as social media and TV and all this stuff. It's like, having to explain to my son, when Caitlyn Jenner became, it was like they're like, why are they making such a big deal out of Caitlyn Jenner? And I'm like, well, let me explain, and I had to like go through like the anatomy and then here's how we feel. Like, for instance, if you have a favorite color and you're supposed to have this favorite color, and they're like, well, why? And I'm like, well, it's just how you were born, right? Like, how you were born is this is your favorite color. But if I told you that you should have this instead, you're not really, you could try to like that other color, but you're really going to still have that favorite color. And that's kind of how, I explained it to a kid.
No, that's a good way of explaining it to them.
And it's like, oh, well, who cares is what he said. I was like, yeah, who cares? Live your life, be you, and don't judge them. They have their own struggles just like we have our own. And for us to be able to, it's not just treat women, it's treat everyone. Treat everyone with respect. Because not only that, like, even when my son comes with me to jiu-jitsu and I'm seeing other big, tough guys, he knows, because he sees what belt they are. He knows who's tough, and how I treat someone who is either same belt as me, higher belt than me, or even a brand new person. He's watching how I treat people with respect. And these are guys most of the time.
Yeah.
There are girls as well, but like, it's guys that I would talk to and be like, here's how I want to show you, like, you're capable, you're amazing. Like, I would pump them up. And then I would have my son sometimes. I'll be like, hey, I was like, you just asked this question. I was like, have my son show you real fast.
Oh,
and
wow.
he goes and teaches them, and he's doing it exactly how I teach.
Nice.
Because he watched. He learned from watching, and that's how we are. We're human beings that we observe and we watch.
Wow. Well, Arthur, thank you so much for coming on here, dude. This has been awesome. I'm not gonna lie. I was super skeptical at first, because I'm just like, oh, this is our first guest speaker. Who knows how well this is gonna go? But this has been so enlightening. Just being able to take away like so much information from you. And I'm even looking back now for my own job. I'm like, man, I've probably messed up a few times. Definitely a few things I can do better. But it's one of those things of, like you said, it's either you're winning or you're learning.
Yep.
And I think that's something we can all take into our own lives.
You're supposed to mess up. That's all there's to it. If you don't mess up, you're not doing it right. you got to mess up and learn what not to do
and grow together as a team.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah.
Any last words that you got for people, Arthur?
No, everyone should do jujitsu. And if you want to go see me in jujitsu, go to the Provo Mall at Agima. That's the best place to go. And yeah, I think, treat everyone with respect, love everyone, give hugs to the people.
Yeah, I still struggle with hugs.
Yeah, he won't give me a hug, man. I got to get him.
Yeah. I'm working on it though. No, I'm not. I'm lying to you now. I won't lie on the podcast. All right. Eric, you got anything?
No, just for all you new parents out there, just do your best, to be a parent. Like you mentioned earlier, it's there's no manual for how to raise your kids, but I think he gave you the correct tools for a start, and so just go out there and do your best.
Yeah, just remember it's a team effort, and whatever you're doing when you're raising kids, it's a team effort. Well, anyway, thanks again, Arthur. We really appreciate having you on, man, on the podcast. Thank you for coming to the Swamp, and for those who are listening, thank you so much for listening. Just letting you know now, we are now available for subscription on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. So if you don't want to just be watching our videos, you can go there too, download it. Just as you're out for a run, walking, whatever, if you feel like we're worth listening to, there you go. You can have us in your ear. All right. Well, thank you guys. And until next time, stay the hell out of our swamp.